evening, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives in Religion. And as always, I greet you in the African tradition of Hotep, which means peace, and peace be unto you. Want to share with you today a question that has puzzled me for some time, and it always seems to puzzle me, and I'm sure some of you as well. And the question that I have on my mind today is why is it that Afrika is not considered the Holy Land? At least to African Americans, understanding that all and every other ethnic group has a holy something in their homeland that everyone can agree on. My question is, why is there not a holy land in the continent of Africa, if not even just simply considering Africa as a holy land? And this question has puzzled me for some time. And the reason why is the more that I study deep into our African culture and heritage, I recognize how much we have given to the world. And so I wonder, if those of us who care, and certainly those who could care less, need to still understand the reasoning behind recognizing Africa as a holy land. For the world looks at our homeland, for the most part, as some sort of wasteland to be exploited and buffooned and forgotten. And maybe this is because somebody knew something about our motherland that they did not want you nor I to know. Yet, in the beginning, Afrika was considered the Holy Land. And when I say the beginning, I'm talking about going to the biblical reference of the Bible, the Holy Bible, that even from the very beginning in Genesis, and we followed right up through to the New Testament, Afrika was considered a holy land to all of the great prophets. Yet today, Europe has successfully destroyed, erased, and corrupted the great image of our motherland. But to make it even more damning is that we, sons and daughters of this great continent, have accepted and allowed this tragedy to persist in our own culture. When we refuse to teach and to impregnate our young folk with the history and culture, we do as much damage unbeknowing as those who knew what they were doing. In the Hebrew religion, just sort of taking you back through history, in the Hebrew religion, you have Abraham being told by God to go into Egypt. And Abraham, as you know, is really the father of Judaism. Then as you continue upward, you have Joseph. Joseph was directed to make Egypt his home. Moses, we know that through divine intervention, was sent into this holy land called Egypt. And Jesus, again, through divine intervention, was directed by way of his mom and dad to go into Egypt. And consequently, every one of them came out more blessed than they were before they got there. They were anointed, instructed, and sent into the world, either personally or through their offspring, as was the case with Ishmael, who was the son of Hagar. From their experience in Egypt came the 4 major religions of the world: Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and let us not forget India, which with its national religion called Hinduism, which to this day in Hinduism practices part of the religion of the Shitat Torah, which is the very first religion that has been recorded in the world, and that is the Shitat Torah of Egypt. So how else can they explain? Now, when I talk about, I'm talking about India now. How else can they explain the sacredness of the cow if they had no dealings with the African religion of Egypt? Because the cow is symbolic of the goddess Hathor or Heru in the ancient times of ancient Egypt. And the cow was considered as sacred because it depicted the goddess feeding the earth. And even today, still in India, they practice of yoga. And through yoga and their various gods and goddesses are very similar to ancient Egyptian religion. And now, incidentally, don't let the word yoga fool you into some false belief of paganism, because the literal meaning of the word yoga is to yoke or to link back. And you remember Christ said in the Bible, "My yoke is easy." The implication is to link back individual consciousness or human personality to its original source, which is the essence of God. It is a discipline that is designed to free the soul, which is what Christ came to do, and that was to make us free. So yoga was practiced in ancient Egypt earlier than anywhere else in history, yet it's not given the credit. But all religions today have one purpose, and that is freeing us from the world and linking us to God. This is what African people practiced and gave to the world, but yet Africa is not considered a holy land. Mecca, right, through Islam, is considered holy. Rome, with the Vatican and or the cathedral, however you want to look at it, is considered holy. And if you read in Daniel, which is very ironic, Daniel prophesies that the beast is going to be coming out of Rome. And that's in Daniel 7, the first several verses of that. And also in Revelations, it talks about the beast, the political system and structure that is set up, coming out of Rome. But yet we consider Rome as one of the holy places to travel to. Yet Africa is not considered holy. Jerusalem is considered holy. Moses, remember the time in Exodus, it says Moses worshipped a burning bush. All right. Now, when they talk about Africans, they try to suggest that Africans are animists, and that's those who worship trees and nature. But yet Moses worshipped the burning bush, and we consider that divine intervention from God. The Kaaba, which is part of the Islamic Hajj, is considered holy. The Kaaba, which is called the House of Hagar, which was named after the Egyptian goddess Hathor, right? This is considered holy. Jerusalem, the wall of Jerusalem, considered holy. People travel back and forth to all of these places because these places have been designated as holy lands. Even Solomon's temple, which supposedly is built or was built on Mount Moriah, which, by the way, is no longer in existence, but yet considered holy. I mean, we don't even have proof that it existed, but yet it's considered holy. Yet the pyramids still stand, as well as the Sphinx. And they both are twice as old as Solomon's temple. These are the oldest temples in the world. The pyramid, the Sphinx, and let us not forget to mention the obelisk. These are still standing, but yet they're not considered holy. And the pyramids. Look at the structure of the pyramids, built on a geometric plane at the center of the planet Earth. A perfect northeast-southwest unilateral plane built to what is now referred to as a sacred science. 750 feet on each corner. A structure so perfect that even today's modern science cannot figure out how such an edifice with such minute precision could have been humanly possible during a time in excess of 5,000 years ago. And today, when we look at all of the settling that has taken place in the buildings, well, when buildings go up after so many years, they start to settle. Yet even today, it is said that you cannot stick a knife between the bricks because of the structure and the soundness of which it has been put together. But yet it is still not considered sacred. Now, this bothers me. It troubles me to understand or try to understand why this greatness is not considered holy. Holy enough that you and I cannot make plans, preservations, reservations, or whatever to make a Hajj to our holy land. We don't even consider that. We consider all these other places. But yet the same land of Africa, Egypt, Africa, whose architectural designs have been copied, reproduced, and mimicked throughout the world. But yet we're not considered holy. Our nation's capital, built on the geometric contours of Egypt. Las Vegas. Go to Las Vegas, and they got all sorts of replicas of Egypt. Heck, you can go downtown Asheville and you can see replicas of Egypt, and with the obelisk that they have in the center of town. The dollar bill. I mean, look at the dollar bill, and look at how they've copied and replicated those symbols that were developed and used as spiritual symbols in the culture of ancient Egypt. And on the back of your dollar is a symbol of an eagle. From the remotest times of Egypt, they used the hawk, and the hawk was used as a symbol that represented the all-encompassing divinity, the supreme being, creator of all things. This was symbolic of the hawk. Heru says the hawk was also the symbol of the human soul, signifying that the supreme being and the human soul are identical. Also, as you look at the eagle, which is symbolic really of the hawk, and in its talons, or the claws, if you will, it's shown holding on to an olive branch and another branch. And the same symbol is taken right out of the symbol of the hawk that symbolized the human soul in ancient Egyptian spirituality. And in those talons of the hawk, it has in one talon, he's shown holding the shin, and in the other talon, he's shown holding what is called the ankh. And the shin stands for eternity, and the ankh stands for life. And the ankh itself is based on ma'at, truth, righteousness, and justice. This is how the nation of Egypt was to be governed always by every pharaoh who came into the throne. He had to go through a whole process of ma'at, knowing it, all 42 laws of ma'at, and that's how he ruled, or she ruled. And this is why the civilization itself lasted so long, and we can't seem to grasp the intellectual value of such a nation because of its contributions to the Almighty God, what it gave and what it learned and what it espoused to the citizens. The hawk itself, as I said, being the symbol of Heru, was also the god of light, vision, and speed. So when you looked at the hawk symbol, we should immediately be drawn to those qualities that a hawk possessed, which is vision, tenacity, speed, freedom, etc. And the same feeling, you see, the same feeling you would get if you, when you understand that the hawk, you didn't look at it as a hawk or a bird of nature. You looked at the attributes of the hawk, and you came in immediate contact with the vision of the all-seeing God. The tenacity, the vision, the speed, the freedom with which the hawk flies through the air is the same concept that we use today. If you go into the hospital and you come into the main lobby, there's a symbol there that shows a cigarette with a line going through it. We immediately visualize that means no smoking. So without having to read a sign saying no smoking in this area, that symbol signifies that whole sentence of no smoking in this area. And this is the same symbol and the way the symbols were used in ancient Egypt. And the way that the society of Egypt and its culture was built, yet today we don't consider it holy. But we can emulate it, and we can see it all around us, but for some reason, it's not considered holy. I have to ask the question, that simply bothers me, and I want to know why we don't consider it holy. In fact, you can't even exist in America and not be impacted by the accomplishments of Egyptian spirituality. Yet we still don't consider it holy. And so, people ask, well, why do you study ancient African religion? Nobody's interested in that. So what? I'm interested in it. Heck, and and because of my interest in it, I shouldn't worry about who or what is interested in learning about ancient African religion. My feeling is, why isn't Africa the Holy Land? Why isn't Egypt the Holy Land? So I'll continue to tell my story. I mean, in the Bible, there's a certain section in Amos. Amos, I believe it's chapter 5. Can't give you the verses, but it says, "Seeketh him that maketh up the 7 stars of Orion." And who do you think Orion, the 7 stars of Orion? That has to do with the pyramids, and symbolic of the first king of Kemet. This was created and implemented in Egypt. And the first king of Kemet, whose name is Asar, and whose symbol can be found on the capstone of the pyramid, was a journey into the heavens by way of the pyramids. This is symbolic of what the pyramid stood for. And the same pyramid found on the back of the dollar bill, with the stars and the all-seeing eye, same thing. But we can take Egyptian symbols, put it on our money, symbolizing its sacredness, but Egypt is not considered holy. Hosea 4:6. This I know and can never forget it, and you should never forget it. It says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." I want to share with you a concept to sort of highlight the high culture of ancient Egypt. And one of the concepts it used as spirituality in the form of worship was the goddess concept. And in the goddess concept, it was the goddess Nut, and Nut was symbolized as a woman. The goddess was the concept of heaven as a spiral concept created by, or should I say, a spiritual concept, but it showed her in a spiral form in an arc created by ancient Kemet from their spiritual view of the universe and its relationship with the woman. It was called the microcosm and the macrocosm. And our ancestors saw that there were two heavens, the micro heaven that was the womb and the macro heaven that was the universe. And you ask the question, well, why would they associate the woman's body with the universe? Well, they saw that her body operated on the same principles as the universe. So they created the universe as an ark, represented by Goddess Nut. And if you go to the West Bank and in the temple of Ursa Ma'at Ra, Setepen Ra in Ramses Merriman, which the corrupt name is Ramses II, you'll see in the temples, on the temple walls, the Goddess Nut in an ark with stars going across her body. Today, in the yoga, they call it the downward dog, where you stand on both hands and 2 feet, and you raise up in an arc. Well, this is on the temple walls, and it shows the Goddess Nut in an arc, and over her body are stars crossing over her body, symbolizing that she's giving birth to the sun and stars, symbolizing that just as the woman's body gives birth to the sun, that's the S-O-N, from the micro-universe, then from the macro-universe would be the sun. So when you look up in the sky, you see the sun that was born from the macro womb of the universe, the black hole. And the egg that flows from the fallopian tubes also has polar objects that rotate around the egg, just like planets rotate around the sun. In the Bible, we see that the heavens was the ark of heaven, because Nut was always in an ark of the heavens. So the world concept of heaven was always in the concept of Nut, in ark form. That's the goddess Nut. That's why the woman was always looked at as a micro heaven in ancient Kemetic hieroglyph. So we all came from the womb, so therefore the micro womb of the woman and the macro womb of the universe were considered one and the same in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Well, in the European misogynistic mentality towards women, they weren't buying such a theory or theological concept, so naturally they created their own, and and called it the virgin birth. But yet Yeshua, who today you call Jesus, had to come from a womb just like everyone else. And so the goddess was an integral part of all Naturian traditions. And in some providences, she was depicted as a supreme being in her own right. In fact, the goddess was also the author or creator, giving birth as a great cow, which I mentioned earlier about the Egyptian theology, the Indian theology, India theology, which is Hinduism. So Egyptian doctrine held that there is a realm of light beyond our physical universe where food, clothing, and our bodies are of light, and that we would exist forever as beings of light, along with other beings of light. This later became part of the pyramid text that used what was called the Akhus, and that's the stars in the sky. That human beings, upon attaining divine status, which we all have within us, this Christ spirit, and we are to rise up this Christ spirit and to be like Christ. Even Christ says in the Bible that greater works than these thou shalt do also. And so by rising up and attaining our divine status, this comes about through living a life of virtue and attaining the status of divinity by reconstituting within oneself one's original cosmic forces. How do you do that? You do that through the 42 laws of Ma'at: righteousness, truth, virtue. So based on how we live, we can achieve the Christ spirit within us and raise it up so that we also would be beings of light. There's two theories that the world operates on. One is spiritual fact, and the other is religious beliefs. I think the spiritual fact is that Egypt, Africa, certainly should be considered a holy land because of its contributions to religion and spirituality. If we look at it as a spiritual fact, we can say we all have a Christ spirit within us. Religious beliefs states that man can walk on water. And there's a difference between spiritual fact and spiritual belief. And so what we are about is spiritual fact, so that we might come into a relationship with the divine. Spiritual belief says that we have to conform and confide to whatever the religious beliefs are within our system, whether it be church, the synagogue, what have you. But as long as we have spiritual fact, we can go into any religion, any church, any mosque, and be in agreement, because spiritual facts simply state that you and I are one, and that we don't deal in beliefs and doctrines. Spiritual fact, man has the capacity to rise up his or her Christ spirit and become like Christ. A religious belief is that Christ is going to come down from the sky, amen, and since the image that we have is of the image that we were raised in the Western world to see Jesus as a particular person, so we're going to be looking up in the sky for Jesus to come in the sky, and if Jesus comes looking as an Egyptian, an African, spiritual belief would say that cannot be true. Religious belief says that cannot be true, because religious belief has already indoctrinated in us what Jesus looked like. But yet in the Gospel of Revelation says that we will all be deceived by the Antichrist. And so spiritual fact is that you and I have to raise up the Christ that is within us and become beings of light. I thank you for your time. You've been listening to Perspectives in Religion. My name is Wayne Purcell, and as always, I thank you for allowing me to tell our story.